Generally speaking, for a video like this, I would try to build up a little bit of mystery and intrigue by being like, ooh, what fight am I going to pick? But I'm not going to waste anyone's time here. It's White versus Bam. I truly believe that this is the worst fight in Tower of God for a myriad of reasons, but I'll kind of generally explain to you. I'm going to say one thing about it that I think is kind of positive, but I look at this fight and I go through the checklist of all the things that make a good fight, and I do not think that this fight checks like any of them. Kind of one. We'll talk about it, but I want you to understand that this fight, if this fight meant a lot to you and you cared about it and you liked it a lot, this is not me trying to say that your opinion is wrong or you shouldn't like the fight. I'm just gonna make the case for why, for me and from my perspective, this was honestly by far the worst fight in the Tower of God series. Let's talk about it.
Talking time just tick away. You ain't clocking hours on the day. All that watching stopping what you claim. Dollar crosses real got me name. Hoping God just get me out this game.
Please like the video, subscribe, and hit the bell down so the Ghost of the 13-month series does not get you and you can stay notified. So let's start positive here. I actually think White was showing out, and the way that he was kind of hunting for Bam like a predator stalking its prey was really cool. And as the fight kind of initially starts with him versus Arya, I don't think the choreography is bad. I don't think it's mind-blowing. I don't think it's his best. I don't think it's Elaine versus Bam when he's bobbing and weaving through the needle weapon inventory or anything of that nature, but it's more than serviceable. Solid. It's good. And that is where my praise ends, unfortunately, because I think once Bam's fake out death happens, this fight becomes visually uninteresting and aesthetically displeasing to look at. He just kind of has this very solemn, almost condescending look, very reminiscent of Enryu probably on the 43rd floor, sending over 9,000 bangs. This look like I'm the irregular. You guys are bugs, and he just has his hands out and he's just like throwing Shinsu at White, and White's just kind of battering them away. And I just don't think it's cool. And when I think about how this eventual clash has been built up since the Dollar Show, since Hokin on the Hell Train, this simply is not the way I thought it would end. And I did not think that White, a beloved character, a second generation slayer, a monster, one of the better legitimate villains and antagonists that we have seen in this narrative, would go out with a whimper and not a bang. Could be wrong. We know that he's Vincente now, and maybe White's still around and he can come back. So we don't know how White's story will end. But I honestly think the timing of this fight is extremely strange as well. I think this is one of the worst times for the fight to happen, considering all of the moving parts going around. But I'm going to circle back to that because there's a little extra tidbit I need to add there. But okay, so for me at the very least, it's not visually entertaining or a visual spectacle. So I don't even like the choreography of this fight. So that's out the window. So what are some other things that make fights important? How about tension? What happens if either character loses? Well, typically when you think about tension, you kind of think about tension for the protagonist or protagonists. When White pulled up on Bam, I was more afraid for White than I was for Bam. I know how SIU writes the character, the 25th Bam, okay? I was not worried about him. I knew he would win. I was worried about White. I'm like, damn it, he's punching up his weight class. He is fighting the champion, so to speak. You are the underdog. I really believe that. And that came full circle when White admits that right now that kid is stronger than I am. And I was like, ooh, from the horse's mouth itself. And this is a character with a lot of pride, with a lot of ego. He would not admit something like that if it was not true. So for anyone trying to be like, oh, White was stronger, yeah, cap. Are you reading the story? Read the damn story. What did the character say? So be quiet over there. Now, no tension. I'm not worried about Bam. And it's not like the tension from White going down is cool for me because I like White. I wanted White to stick around. So I don't have that. So what's something else you could think of? Like stakes. Like what really kind of happens what really happens, right? If the characters win, lose, or draw, or whatever the case is. Like what could really go wrong here? And I'm like, well, Bam is just Bam. It's gonna do whatever he wants, because I think that what this arc was trying to kind of display was that Bam would become less pure. He'd become a bit more impure. He would kind of tap into some of the more maliciousness of the climb, the things that people do to get to become a ranker, to go up the floors. And it's like, there was no dark change. There was no dark twist. Bam is the exact same character. He wasn't even in a trance. He actually baited White to come in close so he can absorb his abilities. Like, Bam was in full control. Bam did not change. Bam did not get corrupted. So just like that whole dark change thing was just cap fugazi, and I don't like that. That's a pump fake that nobody's biting. No one's jumping. We are all grounded when you do stuff like this, except for maybe some of the newcomers. I don't think they really understand how SIU really tends to kind of write these fights. So that's out the window. So I think to myself, okay, what about the intended purpose? What's the big picture takeaway behind this fight? And I start scratching my head. The characters didn't change. Was the whole purpose of this goddamn moment to give Rack, Aguero, and Bam a power up? Because I cannot think of any other reason for why this happened and played out the way that it did. If you have something better in mind, please let me know, because I'm racking my brain trying to find out what was the real purpose of this, because it wasn't about Bam changing character. It wasn't about changing White. That whole his thirst in the sword, that's cool and stuff, but that's not moving me. Like, I like that White is a monster, a bloodthirsty demon who wants power. Like, that's cool. It's okay for him to kind of just be evil like that. So, like, I'm not particularly interested in all the minutia behind it, but it was cool to see some of that stuff with the sword and everything. I'm not going to act like it wasn't cool. Was it because we need Vincente to become something important? Like, I don't think this character particularly is interesting, and I personally, from my perspective, it's not someone that I care about exploring, but maybe he has something important in mind with Vincente. So we'll see. That remains to be seen, but I really think about it like this. So let's kind of go through it. Okay, so stakes, nope. Tension, nope. Visually pleasing fight, nope. What's the big picture takeaway? Power up for power up's sake, and there isn't like any music or like movement like that. Choreography is not like crazy or good. Bam's not doing nothing. He's just kind of standing there in the sky, and I think to myself, what is the reason? Why am I here? Why did this happen now? Are there any consequences? No. Then that's something that sucks too. There was no consequences for how he acted. He was on a mission where he was sacrificing the lives and the time of so many important people, from F.U.G, from Caracas faction, from his own friends, himself, the K9 people. What are we here for? To save Hajin Song and get Yes Ratchet, revenge for the Houndborns. Bam completely forgets about the mission to have a personal squabble, doesn't even lose Arya, revives her. And I always thought to myself, if him beating White, even though he won, right? Or they won, if you will, the golden trio, the trifecta of awesome. If they win that fight, and that is the reason Hajin Sung is not saved because he took too much time doing that, or he couldn't make it to the jumping pad on time because he wasted too many turns fighting White, I would still think this fight had meaning, some type of impact and lasting appeal. But I don't even have that. He just wakes up and moves on to the next thing, and now he's in the suspendium doing mission number 8. What was the point of this fight? And for all of those things combined, I truly believe that this is by far the worst fight in Tower of God. Picking a fight was actually a lot harder than I expected it to be, because the fight that I ended up choosing isn't even my favorite one. My favorite ones being Rand versus Iniesta. You guys know how much I love that Machete line about tanking the hit and hitting them with something stronger. Rand versus Anak. That's just a classic. Shout out to the workshop. I'm actually a huge fan of JVG, Juvial Grace versus Kaiser Name Hunter. I really like the way that he's on the blue orb, kind of bobbing and weaving through her weapon needle inventory. But I actually ended up going with Dana Jaha versus Baam, and here's why. There's some other contenders that I really liked. I actually like Yuri and Karaka and some other ones, but The reason that I went with this one is because I think it ticks off, if not all, most boxes that I think is required for a good and important, impactful, and kind of iconic fight in a series like this, like a graphic novel, if you will. Because the way you write fights and do fights for like an anime, a game, and stuff are all different, and a book are all different, but in your graphic novel type style. And I think this has good stakes, good tension, good build up. I do think what could happen if either character loses is important, and I do like some of the lasting impact that it has throughout the series. So let's talk about it.
It don't matter though. Young nigga from Canada, brought from that bullshit and go like a matador.
This is also one of those battles and moments in time where you kind of have to contextualize what was going on. I would honestly imagine maybe if you were a new reader or you kind of caught up during the third season or the last station or something like that, this may have not meant as much to you, but allow me to kind of just go back in time a little bit. This is kind of before the kind of boom of Fast Pass and stuff like that. There was still like the Korean Raw that will come out, but this is kind of really around that time Fast Pass was probably kind of coming out and being conceptualized, but I was late to Fast Pass. I didn't even know it was out for a couple of weeks or so or months. So I could have just not known it existed yet. That being said, the discussions and discourse were basically on a week-to-week basis, so everybody was on the same page. Is what I'm getting at here. And that created for like actual hype, and nobody could actually kind of hold knowledge that they have from future chapters over your head because we were pretty much all here together at the same time. And on a regular meeting on a regular one of the 13 Great Wars and what Simbi calls the Sword Art Arc, the hidden floor, the data floor, was honestly a big deal, and seeing Bam freak out the way that he does was crazy. And you're like, okay, we're finally good. Yes, it's not King Jihad full power or fully grown Kunedwan slaying all the hoes, but it's like this is on a regular as they were climbing, just like the one we're following. There was so much intrigue there, and the first round didn't go in Bam's favor, and Kunedwan was the one that was training him, teaching him so many things that kind of made Bam seem somewhat incompetent up to this point when you compare him to other irregulars, even though he's still a monster. Like, all of that build-up was extremely vital as well. Now, the fight itself. So Bam's training, we learned a bit about V, we learned a bit about tension, we learned about Shinsu qualities and Shinsu shape and everything like that. So that was all important. Raken and Dorsey and Aguero also trained too. And what you have to notice immediately when this fight's gonna start, and that raw "shall we begin, little monster," like it was really looking like Bam was fighting up a weight class for real. And the game basically was you either beat Jihad straight up or you can break these 3 orbs, and when you break these 3 orbs you win the game. And what I've always liked about Tower of God is they always give the kind of weaker character a fighting chance by letting them be able to win a game, an engagement, a test, whatever the case may be, through different means than straight up confrontation. So if Bam was good enough to just evade and break those 3 orbs without particularly confronting Jihad, that was possible, which goes to show you probably the discrepancy in power that they have, which Bam started to close slowly but surely as he started to understand things about himself and accept some of the monstrous parts within him. And when he entered the true self mode, he used to Stardust and all those things. We got crazy techniques like Cosmos, the Jihad like air palm style. We learned about the like Shinwan Ryu and the kind of the idea of the lightning pill to read on, but you can irregulars can kind of boost themselves without having to take something that will kind of make their body hurt later, a la Data Macheni, a la Kun Ran. And I was like, we are getting a lot here. This is really good. And seeing those guys go at it, I think the choreography was pretty good. Some of the punches and stuff, some of the techniques were crazy, like I mentioned earlier. Bam using the orbs and the sparkles to block some of those punches and attacks, I really thought was cool. And Data Jihad getting a little more interested and getting a little more intrigued by this little boy, coming to fight him. And and then you have to think about how it ends and what it culminates to. And what's really good about this to me is the irregular versus the irregular thing. This is one of the few times where even though Bam ended up kind of showing out and still showcasing how great he was scared. He was fearful. even when he pulled up on Jihad, it's like, yo, I don't know if I can do like I don't really see that from Bam like that. Yeah, he could be a little meek and timid and stuff, but I would argue he's generally confident in what he's doing, or at the very least, he believes that he's taking the right path. And here, there's so much doubt, so much uncertainty in his eyes and in his actions here, which I think really enhanced the moment because I'm like, that Jihad could really pack him because I even think Kunadwan could do it, the data version at the very least, and we don't even know what the sworn enemy Urek Mazino could do. Like there was all those things in the background too going on. Obviously Rachel being not Arlene, what's her name? Icarus, like so many moving parts while this fight is happening. I do think the fight itself is pretty good. The choreography and like how the action sequences play out is solid. It's not my favorite in the series, but I do think it's good. It's good enough and it serves its purpose. I really like the fact that it's kind of an inconclusive battle. I think some people will make the case Jihad won. Some people make the case Bam won. For me, it's kind of like not applicable. Like it's null and void. They didn't finish the fight. So to me, it's a draw. Cause it looked to me like they could still keep going. I believe that Jihad can probably regenerate limbs, or even as early as that, there was a way for him to heal himself. But because this is just data, this is just O's and ones, if you will. When his arm got erased by that attack, he could not bring it back, which put him at a disadvantage, but he can still fight. But when Bam was floating for a bit, he still got back up too, so they could still keep fighting. But what happened next? Who pulled up? Jihad.
Bruh.
You see where I'm going? Like the hype just kept stacking and stacking upon one another. Like, okay, we're on this floor. Oh my god, or a regular data. Oh my god, Bam versus Jihad Part 1. Okay, that didn't go well, but he's being trained by Aguero's dad. That's so crazy. And then now they're confronting each other one again. Bam, this isn't look good for Bam. Maybe he should just not fight him and break the orbs. Wait a minute. Oh my god. He got the Torrents. He said he had the power of the administrator. Like it was a constant crescendo to its ultimate climax of Jihad pulling up and saying, "Didn't I kill you already?" And then after the second Thorn fragment activating to save him. So I really do think you can make cases for some other fights. I really do think Rand versus Anak is really good. I do think Indiana and Rand versus is good. I do think Lane versus Bam is really good and some other ones. But I would argue that this is kind of the most impactful fight in the sense that I think after this moment, Bam's growth rate and leaps and bounds and confidence went through the roof because true self, getting those little horns and stabbing himself to get the power of the administrator is really what catapulted his strength to the next level to do things like damage Calivan, even though he hit him somewhere where Hajin Sung had already hurt him. I think this is the part where he really starts to hit that massive growth rate. But you might think differently. But what do you guys think? Do you think that this is the best fight in Tower of God? Do you not think about it? I think we might have to have a stream about some of the best fights in Tower of God for sure. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, hit the bell of dawn, and shout out to my elite supporters, the Patreon gang, CBL, the Priest of Fire, but especially the Fifth Zen God. Shout out to my tier 3 patrons, Chris, Cayenne, Sonny Kathapali, Miles, Simi, Shoddy to your body, Scob, Tris, Revenant, Chromizone, and Big Abdel. Your support is greatly appreciated.